I'm sure that sometimes at the end of the day, you're just bone tired. You've given your day the best shot. You've fought the good fight. You've done the best thing you can to get through this journey called daily life. And then at the end of the day, maybe all that's left is that little mustard seed that Jesus talks about, that sometimes gets pushed aside and sometimes you think it's buried. But it's that little mustard seed of faith that gets you through and gives you the courage to face another day. So where do you find your strength when you feel like you can't do it anymore? What gets you through those moments where you wonder if you can fulfill your dreams and do what you want to do? And every once in a while, there's a moment or a person that you randomly see, and you look at the way that person handles himself or herself, and you say, that's it. That's what life is all about. When we allow ourselves, as strong as we may think we be, if we allow ourselves to just let that higher power into our life, and most of us call that higher power God, if we really believe down deep inside that God walks every single step with us, then somehow, some way, that keeps that mustard seed alive. I was thinking of those words of Jesus when he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I realized that Jesus says those words to me and to you. Sometimes Jesus looks at me and says, Father, forgive Don, because he really doesn't know what he's doing, which should be no surprise to most of you. So the other day I was watching the news like a lot of you, and it was the end of that trial where the Dallas police officer shot the innocent young man in his apartment. And she was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. The trial was finally over, and there was lots of disagreement about whether the sentence was harsh enough or not, and that's not the point. But the deceased younger brother takes the stand. And he looks at the lady who killed his older brother. And in so many words, he says, I forgive you. I'm not going to forget, but I forgive you. You see, forgiving and forgetting are two totally different things. And then he said, in a crazy way, I love you, and I don't want you to go to jail. I just want what's best for you, despite what happened, because that's the way my older brother was. And the judge starts to cry. And then he looks at the judge and says, is it okay if I go over and hug her? And there's kind of an awkward silence. And he goes up and he gives her a big hug. Here it is, 5:45 in the morning. I'm bawling all by myself in the kitchen with Good Morning America on the TV. But I thought to myself, the power of forgiveness, the power of that mustard seed, in the middle of all the hate and the protests and the stuff that we see on television every day, all the loud stuff that people yell at each other, the loudest voice are the quiet ones of forgiveness, when we put forgiveness and love first, because those words speak the loudest. And that's a life changer. Because my Lordy Gadordy, if he can forgive there, maybe Don, I could be a little more forgiving myself. Sometimes we think in order to forgive, we need to forget, but I don't know what you're like, but I don't forget anything anybody's done to me, and every time I screw something up, I don't forget that either. But somehow, some way, each one of us needs that invitation to face tomorrow despite the mistakes that we make. Forgiveness has life-changing power when it comes alive in the lives of people like you and me. The invitation to try again and to face tomorrow. You guys know what a biblical scholar I am. That's obvious. And I've been thinking a lot about the name Adam. Adam and Eve. It's interesting because in Hebrew, the word Adam is Adam, and it means mankind. You throw a vowel on the end, Adamah, and it means womankind. And so the word Adam has kind of a universal tone to it. And so as I kept thinking about the word Adam, I kept thinking about a young man that many of you never met. And his name is Adam Brettel. Happens to be Ann Fritz's brother. Adam's dad, Ken Brettel, used to come here. They moved to Indiana. And Ken taught Sunday school. And he did our Thursday night worship. And it was funny because he always played the guitar. And every Thursday night we would sing Kumbaya and Peace Like a River because those were the only two songs he knew. But he'd come up with his long hair and his beard and he'd play that and people would hump and stomp and enjoy it. But then he has a son. And it was so powerful to me because Adam struggled with addictions. And many of you know what that's like. And when Adam died, I remember going to Indiana to the addiction center where he spent a lot of his time. And in the basement of that building, we had a memorial service for Adam. It was so powerful because in the midst of that struggle, in the midst of all the 12-step people that gathered around to say goodbye, inside all that was a mustard seed. Because even in his death, that mustard seed never went away. Because the mustard seed is the smallest and the most powerful of all the seeds. And speaking of mustard and Adam, after thinking about him this morning, I stepped outside the front door. And the sunrise this morning was absolutely ridiculous. The clouds, it looked like Neapolitan ice cream, you know, the orange laced in between the clouds. And I said, God, this is a 10, 11, a 12. It's one of your better ones. And then I looked at the picture of Adam Alsott. His picture has been on the wall outside my office for between 25 and 30 years since he died. I remember I met him for the first time. His family visited in the summer, and they came to the church picnic, and I couldn't understand why Adam was limping to first base. And then his parents told me, he said, well, Adam has muscular dystrophy, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse as time goes on. I remember the day Adam died. And his parents, who were here earlier at the early service, of course, I ruined their day by talking about him. And that mustard seed never went away. Walkers, wheelchairs, therapy, all that kind of stuff could never take away the mustard seed. And I remember the night before Adam died, I was in his living room, and we were watching the Bulls finals. And nothing on Adam's body worked anymore except his mouth. And he was cheering for the Bulls and ripping the referees. The next morning, for some reason, I was driving west, and an ambulance was driving east. And somehow my mustard seed was rustling inside of me, and I looked at the ambulance, and I had a feeling, so I turned around, and I followed the ambulance to Palos Hospital. And out of the driver's seat jumps Bobby Shippets, a member of our church. And I said, Bobby, is Adam in there? And he nodded his head yes. Adam died that day. But somehow his send-off wasn't too bad because he got an ambulance ride and then a few hours later a chariot ride into heaven. And that's how it all ended. And over the years, even though it's been years since he died and even though he doesn't say a word anymore, over the years Adam has been my rabbi because he has taught me what's important and what's not. And that somehow, some way, he never let his disability or his unfair disease get in the way of his humanity and his dignity. So in life, who teaches you about the power of goodness? Who teaches you about kindness and forgiveness? And who teaches you to keep that mustard seed alive no matter what's happening in your life? People like Adam won't be around forever, and they aren't. And you and I, we're not going to be around forever either. But that mustard seed, that spirit of mankind and womankind, that spiritual Adam that is down deep inside the heart and soul of each one of us, one thing is for sure, that seed will never ever go away. Amen. If you're able to, please rise for the creed. It's on page 105.